Okay, next we will have, we'll go to our public comment. We have 7 who signed up. So we'll start off with Vince Newmeyer, and then Boyd Tuttle is on deck. So Vince, we'll come up to this mic. We have a timer over here, so now and again, watch over here and you'll get a little warning.
Okay, so red is on, I guess. All right. Thanks for the opportunity to address the State Board today. I have had an opportunity to participate in the science standards before, in the sense that I sat on the Parent Review Committee before the science standards went out to public review. And in that opportunity, I learned some things about the science standards and about the direction of the State Office of Education that concern me. And to kind of cut to the chase, although I could probably give more information you want at this time, but to cut to the chase, here's really one of the crux things that really concerns me. And that is there's an attempt to adopt the next generation science standards as close as is possible. And it would have been a complete word for word last time if we hadn't had some people who spoke up about it. Now, why is that a concern? One of the key reasons, and this is what I warned about at the end, is that the next generation science standards takes a very dogmatic approach to certain key issues in science: Darwinian evolution and global warming. Now, if you come up with a system that is so closely adopted to the or tied to the next generation science standards, those attitudes will come back in to the classroom. And indeed they did. When, as demonstrated, the State Office of Education put out a recommended lesson plan, and that recommended lesson plan was about the life and science of Stephen Hawking. Seems fine. They were supposed to read the supposed to view a video on Stephen Hawking and his science several times as possible, and then report upon it in class. Now, what was the science that Stephen Hawking, which he says in the video, was studying at the time, that was so much the focus? And that is, rather, there needed to be a God for the Big Bang to happen, or could it happen all on its own? And the answer stated by Stephen Hawking in the video was no. There was no time in which there could have been a God, because time came after the Big Bang. There was no time in which there could have been a God. It happened all on its own. This is the problem with adopting next generation science standards or things very close to it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Boyd Tuttle. Boyd. Okay. Not seeing Boyd, so we'll go to Jessica. Is it Dwyer? Dwyer. Yeah. There you go. Jessica Dwyer.
Good morning. How much time do I have?
How much?
2 minutes? 3 minutes? Great. My name is Jess Dwyer. I'm here from the Center for Science and Mathematics Education at the University of Utah. I'm there for 18 months after a decade-long career as a science teacher in Title I schools. And first, I'd love to thank you for your service. It takes a lot, and I know how much you give to the students of Utah, and we're so grateful. I'm also here to urge you to consider another perspective on opening the science standards. So my job at the Center for Science and Mathematics Education at the University of Utah is to prepare high-quality teacher professional development for the teachers who this year are implementing those new standards. I'm not here to comment on which standards to recommend, but I will tell you that the things that I'm seeing in classrooms in middle school as teachers are implementing the new standards, is just inspiring, because we're not worried so much about the things that science knows, but we're interested in teaching students how science works and how to behave and act as a scientist, and know when they're using discipline-specific thinking as a scientist versus another discipline. So there are three main reasons I'd urge the board to consider opening both the K through 5th standards and the secondary standards for review. First, science moves quickly. It's been over 10 years since these standards have been reviewed. We've learned a lot. Our students deserve to know what's on the cutting edge across not only the nation but the world as far as scientific discovery is concerned. Second, our economy moves quickly. I don't know if you guys heard the KUER piece about a week and a half ago. Qualtrics said that they could hire every single high-quality engineering student from every single Utah university and they would still not fill their need. We have a responsibility to prepare our students to participate in our burgeoning tech economy. Finally, this actually connects to teacher retention, which I know is an issue that you're all concerned about. We know that teachers, when they have autonomy, when they get to be creative and responsive to their students' needs, that is what keeps motivated, creative, generative teachers in the classroom. Opening the standards to allow teachers to engage more with process than to content could have significant impacts for science teacher retention. Remember, these guys could leave the classroom and make double, triple, anytime they wanted. We need to think about what's going to keep them in the classroom. Thank you so much for your time. I encourage you to consider opening the standards for review.
Thank you. Next up is Frank Strickland. Not seeing Frank. Okay. Then we'll go to Rita. It looks like Hegren or Hegren. Hegren? Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Rita Hegren with American Federation of Teachers Utah, and as I would tell my students, think of a bale of hay with a smiley face on it, Hegren. Okay, there you go.
Got it.
Thank you for hearing us today. We are concerned with the proposed rule alterations in Rule 515, specifically lines 313 to 314, where a documented direction from an LEA would be subject to licensing discipline. This was also noted by Board Member Lear in a previous board meeting. I recently participated in a shareholder focus group on the licensing, with the changes that are happening in the licensing, and the board representative who was running that focus group repeatedly emphasized the board's desire to separate licensing from employment, repeatedly. But the proposed change to Rule 515 blurs those lines. By including a documented directive to a particular teacher versus a policy, a school-wide policy that would apply to everybody, or a district policy that would apply to everybody, it blurs those lines by including that as part of a licensing discipline. We urge the board to reject this specific addition to Rule 515. Thank you.
Thank you. We normally don't ask questions, but did you have a comment?
Sorry, well, she just kept referencing we, but didn't, unless I missed what the we was, I just wanted,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay, sorry.
We,
Oh, yes, you did say that.
American Federation of Teachers, the teacher union in Utah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Jones with the UEA.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Jones with the Utah Education Association. My comments this morning address an item that will be on your agenda later today in the Standards and Assessment discussion, R277920, the School Improvement Rule. We shared a number of concerns about that rule in committee. The rule was passed with the expectation that the rule would be revised, which it was. And we appreciate that, and a number of our concerns were addressed in that process. But we still have one significant concern that we hope you will take note of during your discussion today, and this is with revision 2. The concern is that the rule expands the provisions of the turnaround code to new categories of schools. This is in lines 97 to 99. The result is that many more schools will be subject to the consequences facing turnaround schools that don't improve in a timely manner. Specifically, the turnaround code authorizes the board to intervene in these schools through contract management conversion to a charter school, or state takeover. So this rule would create a real expansion of the board's authority over local school boards by authorizing those same actions, including this state takeover, not just of turnaround schools as currently required, but of any school in improvement that doesn't meet the exit criteria. So specifically, I draw your attention to lines 330 to 333, which says the board can temporarily appoint a public or nonprofit entity other than the local school board to manage and operate the school, or permanently transfer control of a school to a public or nonprofit entity. There is no specific requirement in either federal or state code that the board must consider temporarily or permanently transferring control of all schools in improvement. That applies to turnaround schools, not other categories of schools. ESSA requires Utah to take more rigorous action on schools failing to improve, but does not require these specific actions. And the potential problems with these actions are so numerous, does the board want to expand these sanctions to new categories of schools not specifically identified under turnaround statute? I'd also draw your attention to line 329, which asks the board to consider sanctioning schools, quote, by requiring the local school board to change school boundaries. That is a difficult process in the best of circumstances. Is that something the board wants to mandate to a local school board? So I understand the goal of aligning school improvement efforts in a single rule. That's reasonable. And if the board has identified certain procedures in turnaround that would benefit all schools in improvement, like a root cause analysis, the needs assessment, then really the rule needs to be reworded to be very precise and strategic about applying those specific provisions of the turnaround statute to all schools in improvement. So we ask that this rule not be passed on second and final reading today, to allow board members to consider the unintended consequences of expanding the sanctions facing turnaround schools to other schools in improvement. And on just a final note, we recognize the board is always under time constraint to pass rules in a timely manner, but we encourage the board to use the committee process to fully vet and prepare a rule before it comes to the full board. That provides the greatest opportunity for dialogue back and forth between committee members and the public. And there's just not that same level of engagement at this point in the process. And it also limits the ability of board members to get feedback from their constituents on a rule if it's passed on second and final reading in the same month. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Syndergaard.
Good morning. My name is Michael Syndergaard. I represent Mountain State School Book Depository. And I'd just like to thank the Law and Licensing Committee for all of their efforts in revising Rule 277-469. I believe it's item agenda 10.7 for today's meeting. As we've looked at revision 2, we feel like that revision, as proposed by the Law and Licensing Committee, meets the needs of the LEAs, maintains local choice and control, and allows them to purchase materials from the vendors of their choice. As we've spoken to LEAs across the state, they seem satisfied that revision 2 meets their needs and maintains that local control and choice. So we'd just like to encourage the board to approve 277-469 revision 2 as proposed by the Law and Licensing Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We passed on them earlier. I'll see if there's still, if they've arrived. Boyd Tuttle. Not seeing Boyd. Frank Strickland. Not seeing Frank. Okay. Well, this concludes our public comment. Thank you for your participation.